nice to see that the tables are filled up. 10 points to you two for being first in the room. Yeah, it's great. We're going to dive straight into introductions. So in our sector, we do love a bit of jargon, and pie is a buzzword that we've been sort of all using for quite a long time. So for those that are unfamiliar with it, it's psychologically informed environments, and it's something we're trying to nurture, I think, in lots of different spaces. But for Feeling Lies, we kind of like to turn pie on its head and actually have a discussion about real pie and help that to introduce ourselves to each other. So to start things off, I thought it would be really useful if you were to sort of introduce yourself to the person next to you, introduce your name, role, organisation, and your favourite pie. And we won't ask you to do something we won't do ourselves. So I'm Rebecca Riley. I'm the Systems Change Lead with the Feeling Lies South East, working in Brighton and Hove in East Sussex. And my favourite pie is an apple pie with custard on a cold day. Can't beat it.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I also work within the Systems Change team at Feeling Lies South East with Rebecca. And I kind of help with the project assistance side of things. And this is up to you whether you decide whether it's a pie or not, because me and Rebecca were discussing it might not be a pie. But my favourite would be cherry baked flour, like the little tarts. I don't know if it's a pie, but
that's a pie.
Yeah. You can have that. Great. So if you want to pair up with the person next to you, share your name, role, organisation, and your favourite pie. So yeah, thanks everyone. Hopefully you've got to know your neighbour. So just to give a bit of an outline as to what we're going to cover off today and have a conversation together about. We have done our welcomes and introductions. Emily and myself want to just start off by sharing some context and scene setting for why we're here today and are really passionate about talking about systems change and its foundations. We'll share with you what we feel to be our key definitions that really helped inform and guide what we've done. We also wanted to talk about the conditions for change and explore this together as a group, so there will be a few breakout conversations with your neighbour who you now know their favourite pie to be. And we will also have a look at some of the methods for change that the Feeling Lies South East have used to try and leverage positive changes locally across Sussex. And then we will start off with a sort of bit of a with a sort of 5-minute round conversation about any things that are sort of still in your mind that you want to have a conversation with them about today. So that's a sort of rough outline of what we're going to cover. I know it's been billed as a guide to systems change, but I don't think we'll cover all of that in 50 minutes. We've heard from some great speakers this morning already giving us some top tips, but we hope to build on that conversation today and give a flavour of what we feel to be really important elements of systems change that have helped us take that work forward. So, go to the next slide. So why systems change? Why do we think this is important, and why has the Feeling Lies South East become so passionate about it? And I know so many of us in the room are. And when looking at messages for today, I was reminded of one of our Fulfilling Lives clients who took some time out last year to really reflect on the system. And she did this unprovoked, unasked, and she sat down while she was in prison and she wrote a couple of pages that she then shared with her Fulfilling Lives worker. And her message to the Fulfilling Lives worker was, I want you to share this. I really feel that I've had some important learning that can really inform positive changes for the future so that women, like me, don't end up in these same cycles and are a victim of the same sort of systemic failures that she had felt, she had experienced. So I know it's a little bit bright here, so I'm just going to read it out. So, she said, it's so sad that I felt my only way out was prison, but it has worked for me, but has added to my criminal record. If I'd had my own place sooner, I could have got my recovery so much more sooner and reconnected with family who have also witnessed my addiction and struggles. Please consider this experience, which I know is shared by most women living in hostels when housing women and their safety. I would love to see the end of large hostels as they ruin lives, not support them, as people end up stuck for years, giving up hope of a better life. Thank you for giving me a voice. Now that was a sort of ending extract of what she shared, and within the sort of broader text she was reflecting on sort of her prison experience and how she felt that she needed to commit crime in order to break the sort of cycle and sort of jump out of the system she felt held by. And for me, I just thought it picked up the complexity that this individual so articulately was able to express the webs that she felt caught up in. And the fact that she was so articulate and wanting to share this more widely, I think it really spoke to the complexity that people who are facing multiple disadvantage or multiple complex needs really do face and feel. And I really value what she said. So I think for me this sets the scene why systems change is important, because it's grappling with these complex issues and trying not to oversimplify them and try to find a golden bullet that's going to magically make everything okay within the next week. It's just not going to happen. So I think this is why, for me, systems change feels so important, because it can respond to this sort of complexity. So what laptop am I going to? This one. Okay, so the need for systems change. So when we're working in spaces with people with multiple complex needs, I'm sure you're all aware we are working in those spaces of complexity where there are lots of unknowns, and that can cause quite a bit of discomfort. And I think with systems change, we found that we're not able to just pull a lever here and knowing certainty that that's going to have a result over here that's nice and clean and neat. We also know that we're often trying out new things. So again, there are not often all the guarantees we have best aspirations for, but there aren't always guarantees that when we change something that's going to be changed and formulated in exactly the way we imagine it to be. And with systems change, I think it pays attention to the fact that the ways in which we work and the communities we work in are so interconnected that only really systems change can respond to that and try and bring about those sort of transformative changes we're all seeking here today.
Yeah, so we wanted to kind of talk about a bit about how we came to those conclusions about systems change and who we are. So I know obviously a lot of context has been provided, so hopefully it won't be anything too new to you. But for Feminist South East is in Sussex. We work across Brighton and Hove, Eastbourne and Hastings. And we're one of the 12 projects that was funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. So we work on 2 levels. So we offer kind of the intensive support to people with lived experience of multiple disadvantage or multiple complex needs. And our frontline workers can work in a trauma-informed way to help those people to navigate those complex systems. And then, as we mentioned, Rebecca and I work in a systems change team, so that's kind of the second level of our work. So we kind of try to use all of that evidence and the learning from our clients and the frontline workers and channel that into our work to try and challenge and change systems that we feel are working for those people. And kind of our legacy throughout that is really to just involve lived experience voice in everything that we do. And in terms of why Sussex, obviously as one of 12, we did find that Sussex, there are more people in Sussex than in neighbouring boroughs and councils that experience multiple complex needs. So there was real evidence that that group really needed more support. Do you want to go on to the next slide? Sorry, looking between 2 laptops. So this is just a quick kind of channel into the next kind of topic, which is our systems change journey. So kind of how we got to where we are today and why we're talking to you. So obviously, like I said, the project started in 2014, was funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. And at this point, we're really just trying to kind of grapple with the subject. We were trying to recruit volunteers with lived experience to help to guide our work. We also worked on partnership building, so trying to create relationships with lots of other organisations and people that had the same goals as us and were working towards the same kind of thing. And then in 2015, that is when our frontline work began. So we worked directly with clients, as I mentioned. And at that point, we now had specialist workers. We had a women's specialist worker, and we also had a dual diagnosis worker who worked with people who were trying to navigate the kind of complex mental health system, who were also struggling with substance misuse as well. And we also set up a service user panel. So these include staff and volunteers with lived experience of multiple complex needs. And that is kind of where the system change work kind of came in. So in 2015, kind of moving into 2019, we were just focusing on that localised systems work. kind of quite basic surface level. And then in 2019, we published our manifesto for change. So all of the work that we had done up until then was kind of channeled into 6 themes of different areas we felt really needed focus. So we had health inequalities, domestic abuse and complex needs, the criminal justice system and those who repeat offend, the dual diagnosis, as I mentioned, and temporary accommodations, so unsupported temporary accommodations, and lastly, women who have had repeat experiences of removal of their children into the care system. So from then onwards, from 2019, that's where really all of our project work coincided with those themes, and we were working towards specific commitments for change within all of those areas. And that's kind of what has brought us to today. So in 2022, earlier this year, we released our ripple effect reports. So we have 2 reports. One focuses on the impact of our work in all those thematic areas that I mentioned, kind of what we did, what's changed, and what we feel still needs to happen. And then as well as that, kind of in partnership with that, we spoke about kind of an overview of our systems change work, what is systems change to us, what it means to us, and how that impacted the themes that we worked within, and kind of looked at the guiding principles of how we brought that work about.
Right, so what is systems change? And what sort of definitions have we as a team sort of adopted and felt really sort of aligned to? Well, first off, we really liked the organisation's Forum for the Future's definition of systems change and how it expressed it as a sort of goal and a journey at the same time. And because this is a bit faint, I will read it out. It says, so Forum for the Future say, we believe that creating the change we want to see in the world will require a growing number of people to think and act more systemically. So we see systems change as both an outcome and a process. And for us as a team, that really resonated because we had all of these values we were trying to put into practice and at the same time trying to achieve the goals that we had set out in our manifesto for change at our sort of halfway mark. So we really liked that, and I think this morning's keynotes spoke quite a lot to that sense of journey and evolution. So we really connected with that at our sort of halfway mark. So actually, that's starting to package up what we've learned and the ways in which we want to do this. And then for our National Lottery College, we're pleased to see we really liked your definition because we thought it was really grounded and it made sense of what can sometimes feel like quite a heavy, lofty topic, systems change. We're trying to navigate and change these sometimes huge, very clunky old institutional systems, and that can feel a bit heavy. Where do you start? What does that even look like? How do you know when you get there? So we really liked this definition that sort of set out, you know, a little bit more tangibly what that feeling can look like. So those that may not be able to see this on here, the National Lottery has said that systems changes are changes to people, organisations, policies, processes, cultures, beliefs and environments that make up the system. So it spoke to us to that sort of governance structural element bit, so you might have all your policies and procedures that we want to tweak, but also that cultural bit, which is where the values kick in and behaviours start to change. So we really like that, and that was a useful anchor point for us to go, is there a bit changing here? How do we know what thing might actually be changing out of this? And if we do one, could we then move on to do another? So we like that. We also like that they said that system changes are beneficial, sustainable in the long term, i.e. resilient to future shifts in the environment, and transformational. And they are not tokenistic, doing the same thing under a different name, a clever rebrand, or overly reliant on key individuals. And I think through our work, we really resonate with that. And I think some of our projects, and I don't know how, you know, some of your experiences we might talk through today, they may start off actually in these sort of flexing systems, being a little bit overly reliant on individuals who are bold enough and willing to say, you know, I'll have a go, let's have that conversation about change. They might start off in that space, but reminding ourselves we want to go into this space, you know, up into the transformational piece, up into the space where things do get locked in for the long term. So we really like these definitions. We think it's really important when embarking on systems change to be able to root yourself in a definition and sense check your work and your aspirations against it, because otherwise it can feel too big. and can get a little bit lost. So that's been something that's really connected for us, and we encourage anyone that's looking to go on a systems change journey to have a real think and discussion about what does that definition mean to you, and what are the definitions maybe out there that resonate for you. And it may be that some don't, and that's okay, but having something to anchor us has been really useful. Next. So, further foundations for creating ripples of change. When, as Emily was sharing, when we were reflecting on our learning and wanting to share that learning back with the wider sector and people like yourselves, actually what was coming to the fore a lot of the time were discussions about our values, discussions about how we built relationships, and not necessarily the technical discussions or as many in-depth discussions about certain project outcomes and what that looked like. There was this broader discussion we kept gravitating towards about these sorts of things. And for us, we really wanted to explore these in more depth with you today, because we do think that these particular areas can provide the foundations for your whole range of different project work or systems efforts, and we found this particular approach useful for us. So that's why we want to share it with you today. And those sort of three foundations have been for us, knowing what our drivers for change are and talking about them and sharing them. Identifying what are our guiding principles, what have been those golden threads that have really run through our work and characterised the whole different portfolio of things we've worked on. Actually, there are some things there where we've had similar threads or similar asks, just in different spaces in the system. So what have been those guiding principles? And then our other element that we've landed on has been building trust. And I don't think that's always something that we've named comfortably until the last 12 months. But I think it's actually something we've done really well, even though we may not have spoken about it as much as we do now. But I think it's these three elements for us that feel like foundations for creating systems change and nurturing systems thinking, in order then to select your theory, select your project and partners, and go forward. So, with that in mind, we thought it would be useful with with the person, your neighbours on your table, to have a conversation about your own drivers to change. So, what's motivated your work? So, what brings you to the table? What brings you to this conference today? What are those sort of the essence of that for you? And share that between yourselves, and sort of have maybe 3 minutes just to have a conversation about what your own drivers to change for this minutes. That was just a chance really to connect with what are those things that are driving you to bring you to things like this and the work you do. And just to share, for we sat down and we did some thinking about this too. And for us, I think what we recognise between ourselves as a team is that we're really driven by a sense of trying to achieve social justice, partnership working, a sense of trying to tackle inequalities, and there was, I think, a real shared sense of hope and optimism amongst the group, even on those challenging days, that change is possible. And I think they have been some of the essence of what's driven us, actually, that balancing between, okay, this is tough, we think there's inequality here, we want to address that, but paired with a sense of hope. And I loved the poem about hope in the room earlier. I certainly thought it was fantastic. And I think that really resonates with us as a team when we've sort of had these conversations to articulate our own drivers for change. So that's what's been our fuel and motivated us. And we think connecting with what that fuel is for you and your teams is really important when embarking on systems change, because these journeys are difficult and they're long. And when you were describing your hike up a mountain, it does feel like that sometimes. You want to have a little sit down. Oh, sit down's nice. Shall I just pause here? Is this enough? We found that to be really useful, particularly on the challenging days. So for anybody embarking on your systems change journey, that would be one of our learnings, is make sure you're connected with that, you know what it is, and that you know what it is for yourselves and your teams and organisations. And we've also found that that's been a really useful thing to share with our partners. So when the details of policies or the change of a certain process can feel too long-winded or dull at times, actually having a conversation about, why did you come to this meeting today with us fulfilling lives? Is it because you felt told? What is it that's driving you? Because for us, this is why we're really caring about this. And we think, there are people in your team that care about that too. And we found that to be a really useful leveler. So drivers to change, good for us, good for connecting with others. So I'll hand over to Emily for the next one.
Yes. So in a similar way, another foundation for all of our systems change work has been what are our guiding principles. So whatever the project or the work might be, sometimes I think when we come up against it and we feel like we're struggling a bit, we kind of go back to those guiding principles. What are the key things that we want to make sure are included in our work? So in a similar way, I want to have the same discussion with you to figure out what your guiding principles are. So again, I'll just read it out because I know it can be difficult to read. So it says, what informs how you work? Have there been, or would you like there to be, golden threads that inform all that you do? So for example, for us, co-production is key in everything that we do, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm sure that will be similar for everyone in the room as well. So yeah, just have a think about what guides everything that you do in your work.
Great. Yeah. 3 minutes. Is that all right?
Thank you. Notice that you're all quite chatty, maybe a bit more comfortable. So I was going to ask if anyone was comfortable sharing some of the guiding principles that they might discuss. Yeah? Oh, sorry. I was just saying, I feel like you're a bit more chatty and a bit more comfortable now. So would anyone feel comfortable kind of volunteering, talking about what their guiding principles might be, or one of their guiding principles that they discussed? Don't have to. I can share our guiding principles with you. No? Oh, yeah, sorry.
So we talked about the importance of like flexibility and learning, creating a kind of core principle that people are able to try stuff out and learn from it, as opposed to feeling that they need to kind of implement a specific kind of service model. So making that part of the principle so people feel free to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's something we'll come on to as well, is about having a bit of flexibility to get things from, and not being afraid of that. Thank you. Yeah, like I mentioned, a few of our guiding principles. Yeah, to the next slide. So there were 4 that we really found when we were reflecting and writing the reports. I think there were 4 key things that we picked out that have guided all of our systems change work. So the first one is co-production, as I mentioned earlier, and it's something that's probably going to be mentioned quite a few times today, throughout the day. But for us, what we mean by co-production is making sure that the levels of power between us, the workers, and the service users or previous service users as well as volunteers, that power is distributed evenly. And that's something that has kind of been threaded throughout the whole of the project. So as I mentioned earlier, we really started with just trying to recruit volunteers, and we really wanted to make sure that power was shared, and lived experience voice has really threaded through everything that we do, from just kind of having discussions about consultation that might be happening. We've had people that have come to meetings with us to share their views and tell their stories as well. So there's something that has been threaded throughout. And then another one is trauma-informed practice. Again, it's kind of mentioned earlier. But for us, what we mean by trauma-informed practice is kind of working in a way that recognises the impact that trauma might have had on someone in their lives, and how that might present in themselves, in their actions and their behaviours. And a key part of that is trying to build policies to make sure that the system or the service that you're working doesn't re-traumatise people. And then the third one is...
We've got pragmatic project management tools.
Yes, so using project management. So I think that's something that can be quite scary in this line of work, because I think it's quite, like you say, we want to be flexible, we want to be empathetic, so kind of business terms like project management I think can sound a bit scary, but for us we found that obviously to do system change we need to hold people accountable, so we need to be following the actions that we set out. So we have used project management tools like detailed Gantt charts to kind of track our progress on a project, and I think it just helps to keep people connected as well and involved. If we're trying to engage partners, we want them to be able to trust that we know what we're doing and we're following up with what we said we'll do. So yeah, we've used Gantt charts, and like we mentioned the Forum for the Future definition of systems change. So there is a bit of systems change theory in there as well that we can kind of keep referring back to make sure that we're fulfilling what we really want to. And then lastly, another key principle for us is, again, it can be a bit uncomfortable, is naming multiple complex needs or multiple disadvantage. And I think we have come up against some partners or people that find it really uncomfortable to be they might feel like they're weighed down by a label. And for us, we recognise that and we're wary of that. But for us, we have found, and I'm sure you might have come up against this as well, sometimes even to this day, after 8 years, we are in meetings with people that have very differing understandings of what multiple complex needs is. So we find that we're really just talking about different sets of people and we're not really on the same page. So I think just naming and defining who we mean is the only way to really target the help and support that we'll need to. And I think that's everything on the four.
Yeah, there are 4 principles. Brilliant. So, we're going into our third, and we thought we could do this as a bit of a whole room discussion, because our third principle that sort of informed and guided our systems change efforts has been around building trust. And we've heard this come up already about the importance of relationships at a whole range of different levels. And for us, we wanted to name this as one of our sort of core things that enable systems change and those environments of change to really flourish. Because, as we shared, we are often going on journeys of change to a destination that is not certain. And we, as a collective, often feel like, yes, this is going to improve things, and we have more confidence in that because we're so connected to the people we serve and what we want to achieve. But often we're trying to engage partners in that journey who may not have the supportive environment we have within our teams to go on that journey of change. So we're asking people to often trust us and to try something new, potentially learn, fail, not fail, but learn and adapt. All of those things. So we feel that trust is a really core foundation for enabling sort of systems thinking and systems change, and is a core part of being a systems leader, no matter what sort of rank, for example, you might have in the system. So for us, building trust is one of those core things. So we just wanted to open up the floor for sort of a discussion on what does actually the trust look like in practice? And have you had examples where you're working in partnership and things feel really nice and easy, and it's because maybe trust is playing out. So what does that maybe look like? I don't know if anyone wants to offer up what they think a trusting sort of professional relationship can look like in practice.
Well, I think it's easier, building that trust is easier if you're actually working to the same objectives and outcomes. If everyone's got different agendas, then, it's going to be hard to build that relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that is one of the foundations. Are you all on the same page?
Yeah. So making sure those goals are sort of shared, discussed, and then if you can get on the same page, then you feel that that's it. You start to see the trusting relationship form. Lovely. Anything else?
I think it's about building trust with individuals, so it's about under-committing and over-delivering every time, so that gradually people don't need to take that leap of faith because you're already evidence and proving that you can trust you.
Amazing. I'd like to work with you. That's great. And I can see that maybe playing out at so many different levels. You think with clients, with your partner agencies, with your team, and how you sort of deliver a role model you hope to see back, I suppose. Great. Any more? Yes.
I think there's something about some of the conversations that you'll be having will be with stakeholders that aren't necessarily fully at the table yet. And this is sort of new stuff for them. And I think there's something about how you get around the sort of almost a natural defensiveness of the system as it is, because in a way it's working for them.
Yes.
So I think there's something about coming, in a way, the way that we want to work with people experiencing multiple needs. You need to come to where they are. You need to listen to what their agenda is, and we think you're doing that in order to engage them and get them into the conversation. So something I guess that's a really, really important part of the process.
Nice. This is there for me. We say like authenticity of like calls. Really, it's like if you come speak to people, we're looking to nurture better systems for and learn from them.
I think similar to what that lady said, it's about like the feedback loops as well. So if you're like working with someone and then you go away and do something, like coming back to that and explaining, you know, what has happened, what's been successful, maybe what hasn't worked, and kind of having that ongoing discussion and feedback with each other is really important, because if you go away and do something and then that person doesn't hear back from you, then that relationship and trust is lost or can be lost. So I think that's quite important.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Can I just follow on from that as well? It made me think. I think something really important that we've found is kind of, like you say, having that feedback loop, but kind of building in those celebration points with your partners. Because we know, like I say, we've been here for 8 years. The systems change work is going to be a slow process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And I think kind of building in those celebration points to say, okay, it's a big goal, we've faced some challenges, but we have achieved this so far. And I think that definitely helps to keep the momentum going as well. Yes.
I think if I reflect back on my days working in local authority commissioning and partner supporting people programme, I'd often find partners coming to me and the conversations would begin with 100 reasons why they were better than their competitors and how they dealt with the people who were the highest needs and highest risk and the others excluded them. And I think that kind of quite destructive element of competition is being replaced by a competitive space where actually people are competing on who's the best at collaborating. And I think that's a really, really positive development. I think I've seen it a lot through the Fulfilling Lives programme, that kind of move in that direction. And I think that's about trust. It's about respecting what your competitors are good at and allowing them to do it, and working with them and being good at what you're good at, and making something that's better than the sum of its parts through doing that. And I think if commissioners can get a metric of, you know, we're going to commission the people who are the best at collaborating, then that would be, you know, that would be a massive systems change going on.
Sounds like a game changer. Sounds difficult as well if you are that commissioner and then you've got a whole range of different people coming to you telling you why they're so good. Well, I'm commissioning something because things aren't great. So let's have a look at how we can do that. That must be really difficult. I haven't been a commissioner in that seat, so I feel for you. But thanks. Yes?
I want to throw a question at Andy. So how do you think commission needs to change then? If organisations are coming back to commissioners in that kind of competitive way, partly because the commission system by its nature is competitive. So going forward, because I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying, this move from competitiveness to collaboration, I think that's the answer we need to do this. But to enable that, how do you think commission needs to change?
There's some really good work that's been done by the King's Fund and by a guy called Andy Bogan as well, which looks at what's the difference between commissioning 1.0, the old model, and commissioning 2.0. And I think part of that is about commissioning and designing whole systems rather than individual services, and consciously designing the interactions, the interfaces between those services, rather than just commissioning service A for 12 months and service B for 12 months, and expecting it to work. You wouldn't build a car engine and build the gearbox separately and expect them to fit together. But that's effectively what we're doing with commissioning in this atomised service by service owned model. And then we're giving them a contract that's only going to last 1 to 3 years. They're just getting to know each other, and then they're having to compete with each other for the next contract. So those interfaces haven't even got the time to design themselves effectively, really. So I think a big part of commissioners' jobs in the future is letting the partners design what the delivery service looks like with their service users, like private sector companies do. They design their products with their consumers. And actually, a commissioner's job is the interface between the services. How does this all work together as a system? And I certainly don't see that happening in many places at the moment. I think it's still very atomised.
Thank you.
Sounds exciting. Sounds exciting. And that sounds like an environment, doesn't it, to enable trust. There's giving of trust and allowing space for that creativity and collaboration. So that's exciting. Yes.
I was just coming back on that. There's one area which, at the start of the Fulfilling Lives programme, was kind of getting ready. They were bidding to be one of the areas in the programme. They didn't get it. That's Plymouth. But the conversations that they were having led to a collaboration which has carried on, and an alliance between all the different providers, which has really transformed how things have worked there. So it's another success in Fulfilling Lives, even though none of the money went there.
And they give 10-year contract. The Alliance
Yeah.
Commission is based on a
10 years
10-year
contract.
model, so it's a way of commission that enables that collaboration. But yeah, Plymouth are doing it, but I'm not. I think other areas are starting to think about it, but it's not mainstream yet, I know.
That's great. That's great. There's been an indirect positive outcome from that. So I just wanted to flag this particular quote from Dr. Karen Treisman, who shares that in her TED talk, links on here, trauma is widespread. It pervasively goes into all of the systems we operate in. And we've touched on trauma-informed practice, and I think it's just something that as we're talking about systems change, how does trauma impact on the systems and the people and the policies and things that we work in? So I'll leave that up there just as an added extra in the slides. So we've done all of this soul searching. We've thought about our core sort of foundations and how that then gives us the platform to create our ripples of change. We then had a think back on our project work, and we've done a whole portfolio of projects, I think spanning to about over 50 projects in a whole range of different settings. What do all of these things say to us? And sometimes we've been really opportunistic and just gone, you know what, we've got a partner here. We know, for example, benefit system at this particular job centre says 50% of our clients, we need to do something, and they're saying, let's do it now. We need to jump on that. We haven't had a whole time for design, we've jumped in. So in the last 12 months, we've been able to actually have some reflective time to think about those instances and those projects, as well as our broader, more carefully planned engagements. And I think we came to the conclusion it was about 8 core methods that we then worked from, having had these foundations. And we will, these are set out in our ripple effect reports, which are available online, and there are a few printed copies here today. But we were just going to name each of those to share those with you, and then share an example of one in practice. So do you want to take the first forward?
Yeah. So one of the main things I think I touched on earlier as well was about engaging in consultations. So kind of identifying those opportunities of changes that are happening nationally in policy and trying to feed into that. And then speaking with traditional seats of power, so commissioning cycles, thinking about those kind of fixed or rigid kind of power balances. And then galvanising opinion and debate. So one of the things that we have done is established a East Sussex temporary accommodation action group. So kind of fostering those spaces for people to share their opinions and find those common purposes. And that leads on to the next one as well, fostering new collaborations and creating new spaces. So I think most recently, for example, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner's Office has come into play, and that's been quite a new role. So trying to foster new collaborations in new spaces has been another kind of key method that we've used.
And our sort of further four are investing in new resources. So for Fulfilling Lives, we've had a decent pot of funding. So where systems have felt really challenging, we have invested in pilots or new roles to test and learn from that, share our learning back with the system, to either give it confidence that it should change in a certain direction, or to test out theory we've got and then share that learning more broadly. And that's been really useful for being disruptive, quite quietly sometimes, certainly in the third sector. So that's been really useful. Supporting organisational development. So for some of those big institutional organisations like the DWP or housing departments, supporting their organisational development has had a huge ripple effect on all the other organisations around them. So it may not have been a close knit of collaboration across loads of different departments, but actually that has created some sort of form of systems change, we feel. 7, finding, naming and supporting bright spots. So we're going to come on just to talk about that in a little bit more detail. That's one of our favourite methods, is hopeful. And then the 8th has been learning and educating. So how do we share our learning in sort of informal spaces or in sector spaces like this? Or how do we go into academic institutions like our local universities and support changes to their curriculums for social care workers, which is something we've done. So we're supporting that cultural development in the long term and investing in the future workforces. So there's some of the things we've done, and highlights are in our reports. How have we got? We've got 2 minutes, or is it less than that?
2 minutes will probably be fine, it's just that they finished before.
I hear them get out, so yes, then we come through the door. We just wanted to share a little bit about, bringing one of these methods to life. So one of those that we are really pleased to have sort of found and worked within has been the finding, naming and supporting bright spots. And that particular method draws on some theory from international development spaces, using a positive deviancy approach, bright spots. So what, some of you may be familiar with this already, so apologies, repeat what you already know. But for those who may not be, is a method that uses a structured way of thinking to look at a given context where there are particular social or environmental issues, and looking for where there are organisations, people, communities that are having better outcomes despite the same circumstances and contexts that they're in. So rather than looking for the sort of most sharp end of a problem or an issue, looking at the broader context, saying, well, who's having the best, where are those communities that have the longest life expectancy? Where are those communities where children are well nourished and healthy in an environment where child nutrition and malnutrition is a real issue? So you're looking for those bright spots in the system, and you use this particular method to sort of systematically identify who they are. You then pair that with a sort of an appreciative inquiry. So you go and have a chat with your bright spots, make friends with them, and understand what it is they're doing that's different to everybody else. So what is it that makes, what is it that makes, for example, their child to be taller, healthier, and of a healthier weight, for example? You would look at, well, what are you feeding them, when are you feeding them, what are the sort of environments and sort of practices you have around that, and really understand what it is that differentiates those behaviours to the norm. You then write up those findings and share them, and try and encourage local communities and others to connect with and adopt those ways of working or those behaviours. So bright spots is actually, we found, a really hopeful systems change method, because despite some of these really challenging issues we're looking at, it actually pays tribute to some of the really good work or positive behaviours that are already taking place, and looks to scale them up and really sort of acknowledge them as being the way forward. Did you want to share the example, the worked example quickly?
And do we have time?
Yeah, just sorry. You did go to share.
Yeah, it's okay.
I don't know, do you want to go on to the slide?
I'm going to the slide.
So an example of where we've used this in our project work is with the intermediate care step-away service, and that is run by the Health Inclusion Team in Sussex. So we created a steering group across different professions, including kind of nurses and healthcare professionals, to kind of just create a space for reflection and try to recognise different trends in healthcare for homeless people. And they found that they all kind of agreed that younger patients have a higher frailty score, which is kind of a method that has been used in the healthcare system for quite a while. But the younger patients have a higher frailty score compared to the average in their age group. And we wanted to kind of see if that would work for people who experience homelessness in the healthcare setting. So as a result, the results showed that small groups of patients have more intensive support and care needs. So the frailty score is a key tool to identify the different levels of support. And it helps people to communicate their needs across the system as well, and try to kind of unlock their different care options. And we found that locally, the team that lead the step-away service choose that frailty score, and we're kind of hoping to support housing organisations to do the same as well.
So it's been a sort of frailty scores have been something that's used for a much older population for those that are in sort of care home settings, and then if somebody reaches a certain threshold, then that often unlocks a whole package of care and sort of wraparound support. So we saw that as a bit of a bright spot in the system. Sounds great. So then we've trialled it in the sort of homelessness inclusion health setting and found that these practitioners' concerns about a much younger population having a high frailty score comparable to a 70-year-old was playing out. And actually the language about frailty score helped communicate the real risks of harm for people with the healthcare system and the adult social care system in new ways. So yeah, that's been really positive using the right perspective. And just to end, so there are foundations for building change. So for any change makers in the room, we think these three things in particular are really useful to provide your grounding for selecting your methods and projects. And we hope that our methods as well help decode some of the sort of large theoretical body that's already out there around systems change into something really pragmatic and practical. And it may not be that every method rings true or resonates for you, but we hope that out of some of that learning that there can be useful pragmatic first steps to sort of chip away at further changes in the future. Message of hope. So, system isn't just a collection of any old things. It's actually made up by all of us, and these systems that we're working in are human constructs, and that gives us hope that change is possible, because actually often when we go to have conversations with other partners and agencies about change, they really do connect a lot of the time to the values and the principles of change and have an aspiration to evolve systems in a more positive direction. So, message of hope.
So very quickly, this is included in the Report Back report as well. So as we were kind of writing the report, we were kind of finding that we found that there were particular kind of characteristics that kind of takes to be a systems changer. So all of these things here. So being able to see the bigger picture and having kind of a can-do attitude, being passionate, being empathetic. We found that actually all of these were more important than having a qualification or the experience in a particular setting to be able to create real, tangible systems change.
I think that's it. On these slides, we've got a whole host of different resources as well that may be useful for everyone who's interested in those. Very close. So thank you.